Well, hello there, friends. We are back coming to you live with Trans Northland for another amazing, what will be amazing conversation with our guest star this week. But hey, hi, hello. Thank you for joining us. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for following these conversations, or maybe you're watching after the fact on YouTube, or maybe listening on wherever you get your podcasts from. We really appreciate you and all your support of the work that we're doing here at Trans Northland. So before I bring our marvelous guest star to the stage, I should introduce myself. My name is Sean Hayes, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. I am a co-founder as well as the executive director here at Trans Northland, and it is such a joy to get to do this work in this Northland community that we are building to be a safe and inclusive place for everyone to come and be. So, yes, I am so pumped to welcome to the stage a friend of mine, one of Trans Northland's incredible board members, and just an all-around extraordinary human being. Please help me welcome to the stage Lara. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, however that feels best for you, Lara.
Thanks, Sean, for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of speak and talk on some of these items and participate in this really cool program that we've kind of established here. So thank you again. As Sean said, my name's Lara, she, her pronouns. I am a lawyer by trade and training, have been in the practice for 15 plus years in various states and in various roles. In addition to that, I own a bookstore with my wife, who I've owned that bookstore for 5+ years now, and have a small side law firm in addition to the other stuff I do, and then serve on a couple of different boards, including Trans Northland. So busy, but loving it.
I was just thinking, yeah, you are a busy gal. And we are, just so grateful, that you connected with us here at Trans Northland, I think kind of pretty early on after y'all had moved here. And so I'm just really excited to be able to get more people who may not know you, to just connect and find you in all the different places and ways you show up in our community. And so, thank you again for being here. And full disclosure, Lara helped me because it took me a minute to get back into the swing of things after the holidays. And I was like, oh no, I need a guest star. And Lara jumped in and is just, so helpful in so many different ways to us. So as some of y'all may know, kind of the first little segment of these conversations we've been doing is our Gender Joy segment. And so for folks who haven't seen this or may not be aware of what this segment's all about, gender euphoria, gender joy, it's something that I think every single person in the world experiences. And trans and gender expansive and intersex and two-spirit folks, we really experience that, I think, in some, I don't know, just we have a deeper awareness of those moments when things feel aligned, when things feel good, whether that's in our physical body or how we're presenting out in the world. And so, Lara, I'm curious if you have a gender joy moment that you would like to share with folks.
Yeah, actually I have two. The first one I'll share is that I have been actively trying to get my health fully into control over the last couple of years. And it's done really well. And, I'm actually physically seeing the results. I put on a dress the other day and was like, wait a minute, I have an hourglass figure. So that was nice to finally have after years of being in different health situations. And then the second one, which is probably even more important to me, is just being 900 miles away from, my one of my adult sons, and he texts me and says, "Mom, I miss you so much. I need some motherly advice." And those two, between those two, then the last couple of weeks, it's been a good.
I love that so much. And I think, yeah, these are the moments that sometimes feel harder to pull out when things feel so dark and heavy constantly, 24/7 these days. I swear I wake up, new terrible thing that has happened. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, these moments of joy and euphoria, I think, are so important for me, at least, just to, like, okay, there's still hope, there are still good things happening in the world, despite a lot of what we hear, right, is that real negative, the real scary stuff. And so for me, I actually was driving around earlier before this conversation, and every once in a while, I will swing by my childhood home, which I grew up. We moved here when I was in the 6th grade. So pretty much, this has been my home. And every once in a while, I like to drive by that old house. And this morning, I was just thinking about that little me who was like out in the street playing Foursquare and like just loving my life as a kid. And it was sort of around that time that things started, like I started getting confused kind of about my gender and orientation and all of that. Not confused, but just I knew something was different. And so I don't know, driving by there and thinking about little me and then thinking about me in this moment, it just gave me this sense of like, there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of time where I didn't have the words or the people around me who could be like, here's what you're experiencing. And to be now, here where I am doing the work that I do, almost 11 years into my transition, it just is like mind-blowingly amazing to me. And so, yeah, I guess just a little jaunt down memory lane for me this morning. I'm an Aquarius, so I'm like always thinking about and reflecting on things. But yeah, that felt really, really good to just be like, little me would be real, real proud of who I am today, I think, which feels great.
Yeah, I actually heard a quote the other day, and it really stuck with me. It was at the end of your life, there should be two people that you look to have be proud of you, and that's 8-year-old you and 80-year-old you. If you can go look back at your life and say those two people were proud of what you are, then you've done well.
I like that. I haven't heard of that, but that definitely hits. And yeah, I've recently kind of come to a place where I'm like, yeah, I just got to keep trying to be like the most me, the fullest, most whole version that I can be, which is really hard, but also is like super rewarding, as I know you know too, Lara. So yeah, thanks for sharing in the gender joy with us. And yeah, y'all who are watching, if you have gender euphoria moments, like please feel free to share those in the comments. And we just love hearing those stories. So let's share them out into community. All right, so moving right along, before we dive into our deeper conversation with you, Lara, we also like to talk about community events that are coming up. And, in this time when so much is going on in Minnesota, we've got ICE agents in Duluth. I'm seeing, performers and organizations around the place who are really wrestling with, do we continue to host these events? Do we need to cancel? How do we balance all of the hard stuff that's happening with the fact, I believe, that we still do need to be connecting into community. And so definitely, to each their own, just want to shout out to all of our fellow organizers and folks out there. That Queer Isa is one who, I saw had shared, just kind of debating about how do we move in this time. And I think for us at Trans Northland, we just always believe that having a safe place, whether that's an event or a group, is so important for us, especially now. And so we've got a couple things coming up this month that I want to highlight. First coming up, so not this coming Saturday, but on the 24th, we're going to have a group meeting up at the Imaginarium to learn and practice some Tai Chi. So if that is something you're into, if you're looking to maybe try it for the first time, maybe you've practiced different kinds of forms in the past, everyone is welcome to come and hang out with us and learn this 10-step Tai Chi practice that I practice and have been practicing for a little over 8 years now, I think, which is wild. So come join us for that. We've got our next support group will come up with yours truly, Lara, facilitating this next one on the 26th. That's 6 p.m. And we have the in-person group that meets at the Imaginarium, and you can also join virtually. So if there are folks out there who are like, I'd like to connect, but I don't want to leave my house right now, join us on Zoom. Like, that is always an option that we try to keep for our groups. And then lastly, this is a new thing we're trying out this year. Some of you know, I'm like the only paid staff member at Trans Northland. And last year, one of my huge goals was to plan a lot more community events, a lot more opportunities for folks to connect. And planning events takes a lot of time and energy and detail work. And I'm finding it's harder to hold all of those details in the midst of everything. And so this idea popped up, Show Up Squad. So the idea is there's so many different community events happening out and about every month here in the Northland. And so we are going to be showing up at those events. So once a month, we're going to pick a different type of community event to pop in. Our very first Show Up Squad is going to be meeting up in January at the Superior Flame for Burning Trivia with Aaron. Shout out to Aaron Kenneth, lovely, lovely human who runs that. And it is a good time. I have been there. It's a good group of folks. It's free to play. So show up if you're into that. And then next month, we'll have a new event that we're going to show up. And, you know, the idea is just to kind of keep building solidarity across all of these organizations and groups that are doing really good work here in our community. So come to trivia. And yeah, Lara, I wanted to throw it over to you because I know we'll talk a little bit more about your business and the work you do, but do you have any events or things coming up that you want to shout out right now?
Yeah, I think one of the big special events we have is for the bookshop Crow and Co. We have recently opened up our physical location with Ritual Salad. They've expanded their location, so now they have a second location over in Superior. And it's, you know, colloquially we've been calling it the Ritual Marketplace because there's Ritual Salad, there's us, there's an oddities maker, and a bunch of other cool people that are kind of doing a collective there. And for Valentine's Day this year, we have on the 13th and 14th, we have a seance theater. So definitely check out Ritual Salads, social media, Ritual Marketplace, and Crow & Co.'s, and you will be able to see a little bit more about that really cool event that I'm not going to give too much away because I want people to look it up, but it's going to be an interactive live theater thing. And I think people will really enjoy it.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like nothing I have ever been to or heard about. And so I was just going to be like, what can you tell us? But okay, mom's the word. We'll keep an eye out. And that reminds me, for folks who are watching, here's some of the info where you can find Crow and Co. And what they're up to, because y'all are out and about doing lots of stuff, and you have been. And so it's so exciting about the physical space too, where you can go and actually shop and check out, like, I mean, how many other like businesses are in that space? You said it's a collective, right?
Yeah, so right now we have, you know, a woman who is specializing in kind of the plants. We have a kind of a monthly or bi-monthly artist that is selling in there as well. So right now it's between 4 and 5 different people, and we're looking to add a couple of more in the future. So I think all said and done, we'll probably have 6 or 7 different businesses kind of in that location. So and regular markets as well. So it'll be a good way to highlight what cool stuff is going around the community, not just at that location, but, you know, other kind of pop-up individuals as well.
That is so cool. And I feel slightly ashamed to admit I have not been over there yet, and I got to get over there and check out your new space, y'all.
Well, you're always welcome.
Oh, well, thank you. And yeah, all of y'all need to get over there and check out this new space. I can't remember. Did you mention the address or where it's located?
Yeah, so for those that know where the Spirit Room is, or Yes Cheese is, depending upon what your vibe is, it is in that building. It was the old Red Mug location, so it's in the basement there. And so, yeah, it's a really cool space. The old city hall over in Superior that's been turned into a really cool collect or group of businesses. So
Amazing. Oh my gosh. That's what I thought. I was like, I think it's the old Red Mug spot. And I had only been in there a couple of times. So yeah, I'm excited to check it out. So thanks
yeah,
for sharing about that. And congrats. I mean, that's a
thank
huge thing to not only like find a space and like open a shop, but like to do it in a collective way with community. Like
you.
I feel super inspired by that. And I think there's a lot of possibilities around all of the different like queer and trans folks and allies who are all building these different unique things and services. And I just love a good collective venture.
Well, it's one of those things. I guess I'll use a lake slash sea pun because it's one of my favorite, just phrases in general. But a rising tide lifts all boats, right? And so when you put in your energies together, every one of those businesses are more successful because of the cross promotion, the cross work, etc. And I think that's something we overlook a lot in our society.
Certainly. Yeah. And I think, that the idea of building solidarity across the groups, like I mean, especially in the queer community, and this is like such a small town queer community vibe, I think. I don't know if y'all have picked up on that yet. But a lot of us know each other, right? And sometimes there can be sort of a competitive nature, when you're trying to get folks to show up to your event or your show or whatever it is. And I think there's really something there that we have to figure out is like, how do we come together and like just weave those webs tighter
Mm-hmm.
so that we can support and keep building this thriving community that we want it to be.
Yeah.
So anyways, and that actually reminds me, I can't say hardly anything about it because it's so new in the works, but there are a handful of folks who are coming together to plan a kind of benefit type show. I'm not sure if it'll be drag or variety or what, but the ideas behind is just how can we come together to not only connect and like enjoy art and all of that together, but raise some money for the folks who are most in need right now. We've got folks who are struggling to get groceries or they can't leave their house because they're afraid they might get, stopped by ICE or something else. And so we are in the very early stages of planning a benefit type event. So stay tuned for more about that. So yeah, well, I'm pumped to like get deeper into our conversation, Lara. I mean, every time you and I talk, I just like I'm so grateful for this human and all that you bring and share. And so, to start us off, I'm just curious if you would share more about your story, whatever that means. You can, as my old boss and dear friend Sarah says, you can mind your depth. You don't have to tell us the whole dark, deep story. But yeah, share whatever feels good. And then I'm curious if you'll sort of tie that into the story of how you and Sarah made your way up here to the Northland.
Yeah, definitely. So I was born in Oklahoma and lived in Kansas until we moved up here. Definitely a Midwest girl from most of my time. I met Sarah, my wife, in Wichita, Kansas, and I was lucky enough to do that because she was actually from up here. And so, by happenstance, we happened to be at the same school, and 20 plus years later, we're still together. From that perspective, though, we I kind of had been I had been in practice in law for there since 2009. And then, always knew that, um, my body didn't fit kind of what other people did, and not in the trans way, because it wasn't really like I didn't have some of the like some of the other symptoms or some of the other concerns that friends of mine who were trans did. And I just kind of played it off like, okay, this is just me, and this is how my body works, things like that. And then eventually, about 10 years into my practice of law, I started having some health issues. We went in and did a deep dive with the doctors and specialists and all that, and they confirmed that I was actually intersex. And so, essentially, long story short, for those that don't know, without using the previous, for the older audience, we used to be called hermaphrodites, and then the phrasing has changed, and now the most recent intersex. For me, how there's like 11 or 12 different ways you can actually be intersex. For me, without getting into all the gory details, some of it is the fact that I actually have an XXY chromosome, and so technically I have all my female chromosomes plus a partial Y. And they really think that was just because my mom's body had a tendency. Well, she would have had. I would have been her fourth child, but for that, and all their previous miscarriages were girls. So I think that my body basically just changed just a little enough, so I would make sure I survived the birth canal, and I did, barely. But with that comes a lot of things, like, for example, my body doesn't process testosterone. And actually, it makes me sick, to the point where I can die if my testosterone level gets too high. Now, too high for me is a different beast than even for, the average woman off of the street. So, for example, average woman is about 50, 55 is their number if you were to pull them randomly. And mine has to stay around 3 to 5. And so, your average toddler has more testosterone than I do. And like we've kind of seen where that's at. If it goes up any higher than like 10, I really start to get sick again. And that, physical change is like, I gain a lot of weight. I have trouble breathing. My organs that are overtaxed because they're trying to get rid of the testosterone as quickly as possible, and so my body literally goes into almost shutdown mode. My wife and I had been coming up here for pretty much the entire time that we had been together. This was one of her favorite places, and she very quickly realized that she wanted to bring me up here, and it's a beautiful place. It's very similar to where my family came from in Europe a long, long time ago, so it was. I fell in love with it. We always had a plan to move up here when we retired, and then Kansas, in their what I'll call the trans panic, they were looking to harm trans people about 3 years ago. Specifically trans people, and they had kind of tried to change the law to define any gendered terms that were used in the law. They tried to define it using a quote unquote scientific basis, by basically saying how was your body intended to operate when you were born, right? So were you supposed to be able to, give birth, or were you supposed to be able to, inseminate? And long story short, a number of doctors and myself testified and said, hey, by the way, that's not how that works for a lot of intersex people. So, for example, my body was never intended to be able to reproduce. It's just never been possible. Even though I was born with a uterus, and they removed it when I was a young child. There was never my body was never designed for that purpose. And so we testified on that, and they said, "Oh, maybe we don't want to kick the lawyer out of the state that's been, doing a lot of business with our big businesses and our large industries for a long time." But instead of actually fixing the issue in the law, they just essentially said, "Hey, we'll just take a throwaway line that says, hey, intersex people are disabled under the ADA." And it's like, okay, but that's not, one, how the ADA works, and two, at least not in my case, right? Because the ADA actually requires you to have a substantially limiting life function that keeps you from doing something, publicly, right? Um, the major limitation for me is I can't have children. Well, I'm not doing that at work. I'm not doing that, etc. Right? So it didn't really apply to me, and it made it where it was questionable whether I still was the parent of my children. If it made it question whether I was still could pass down property in Kansas and all of that. And it was roughly at the same time that Minnesota passed the was it trans protective laws, but they also included intersex people in it. And, it just kind of sped up our timeline, right? Because we had planned on getting up here at some point anyway. And then with all of that, we're just like, you know what, it's time to make a change. And we did. And the Northland has been super welcoming to us. We've absolutely loved it up here. And now that we've been up here for almost 3 years, and it's been a glorious ride. And I'd change the factors that got us here, but I wouldn't change the fact that we're here.
Yes, I wouldn't either. I mean, we are so glad that y'all are here. And yeah, thank you. I mean, for sharing about your story. And I think, I think intersex folks' stories are just not out there as much as they should be. I think I was just at this church on this past Sunday, giving a little sort of mini Trans 101 training. And, I briefly touch on intersex identities and what that means to be intersex. And then I always sort of talk about, and there is a movement of folks who are trying to help folks understand what it means, not only what it means to be intersex, but like how parents and caregivers can take care of their intersex newborns and small children, because oftentimes I think in history, and way more than me, but, folks, parents are oftentimes counseled by doctors and medical staff on, how they should respond to having an intersex child. And oftentimes that looks like surgeries and things that it sounds like you had to experience some of. And then in the long run, that didn't fit for you, right? I mean, later in life, you still had to kind of figure this out and be like, wait a minute, that would have been great, I'm sure, for you as a human to be able to be at a point where you could make those decisions about your body rather than having to react to, what choices were made for you when you couldn't, if that makes sense.
No, that's exactly right. And for me, and this is also why, trans and intersex, while there's some overlap as to kind of, the issues that we fight together, when trans people kind of explain their kind of experience and how their transition occurred versus, mine as an intersex woman, there's some pieces that kind of overlap, but a lot of times it doesn't, and it's not really a one-to-one. So for example, for me, as you kind of noted, they had made some decisions, think about the timeline. It was 1980 in Oklahoma. Intersex people are about 1%, at least 1% of the population known. And so it's a rarity of a rarity. And for me, even more so, because I have multiple intersex aspects. So like, I'm probably like 0.1% of the population, frankly. And so from that perspective, for me, my body actually rebelled against what had been done in the past. And then once the doctors kind of took their hands off the wheel, my health went back to normal. So like I was 350 pounds because when they were pumping me full of meds to try to rectify what they thought was the right decision, they took me off of those, and now I'm 150 pounds. I got diabetes from that process. Now my A1C is perfect. I could actually run a 13-minute mile, which I haven't been able to do since high school.
That's impressive.
Yeah, so like, but like I went from literally like at that time, Sarah brought me up here to be what was my last trip. She really thought she was going to be burying me about a decade ago, and instead we found the right people. Luckily, I just happened to find a doctor who was who had written about her experience because she was an intersex woman as well. And she ended up becoming a doctor and a PhD and a bunch of other stuff. And she hadn't written an article in the Atlantic. And I'm like, her story sounds a lot like mine. And I just happened to reach out to her, and that's how kind of the stars aligned to figure out, oh yeah, this is my story too. But yeah, all of those things, if I would have had the decision to be able to just kind of go with what my body was already doing without any intervention, I would have been a lot healthier and frankly, a lot happier a lot sooner. So, but I'm in a good place now. That's what matters.
Yes, that certainly does matter. And I do think it's interesting. I got to say, when you said you're like 0.1% of the population based on your intersex characteristics, I was like, well, that just makes sense because you are extraordinary in so many ways. And literally, physically, on the chromosomal level, you are extraordinary. So have to shout you out for that. But I do appreciate you sharing because I think it's, I mean, if we don't know someone who's intersex, if we don't have an intersex child, like there's a good chance we are not educated on what that even means. And then what in our society is like so effed up and is harming intersex people, right? And so I just think, it just always makes me think people who, like this person who became a doctor and got a PhD, like if those folks aren't out there sharing their stories, people like us don't hear them. We don't learn who it is we are. We don't, we can't make those positive, like healthy changes in our lives. And I mean, I'm just incredibly grateful that now it's like you're at a place where you feel good, you feel healthy, and the doctors don't always have the right answers. I mean, it just goes to show, especially back then, right, in the 80s.
Exactly. Well, and I was lucky. I had a good set of doctors who, once they started putting the pieces together, quickly realized that they needed to make a change, and they had no ego about their previous path. They very quickly made the modification, and they were just happy to see that I was getting healthier and happier. So.
Yes. Oh, good. That's exactly the best way, right? That folks should respond when they realize, oh, shoot, I messed that up, or I screwed up someone's pronouns, or whatever it is. We just change and work on it and do better, right?
Yeah, just change and move on.
That's it. All right. Well, yeah. Okay. So you co-own this business. You're also a lawyer. You work for like an international company, I believe. Like, tell us about all of these different things that you do.
Yeah. So my day job, if you will, is I'm an international business lawyer for a large global company out of Switzerland with operations across 6 of the 7 continents. I don't think we're working with the penguins yet, but other than that, about 20,000 people in the company. So it's really fun. It's in the life sciences space, which is something that I've kind of stumbled into, but really enjoyed, during my career. Other than that, I do have a small kind of side law firm that I do kind of on the nights and weekends, which focuses primarily on LGBTQ rights and other kind of rights like that. Mostly non-court work, getting documentation in place and things like that, answering those types of questions. And then, which we can talk a little bit more later, I think, on a future question we have for today. And then again, one of my passion projects is the bookstore, where we specialize in the queer, the weird, and the wonderful. Which really just means we get to curate our tastes of whatever we find kind of fun. So we do a lot of horror, we do a lot of fantasy, we do a lot of for me the nonfiction and like things like life sciences space about one of the books we have on the shelf right now is called Quackery, the worst ways that man has thought about curing disease, and stuff like that. In addition to the physical space, we also do pop-ups around the Twin Ports area. We have 2 standing pop-ups at Duluth Cider on first Saturday. And then we have Bent Paddle. We do one on the second Sunday and fourth Sunday. Oh, and the fourth Sunday is a book swap, which is kind of a cool little way we do. Essentially, you can bring up up to 4 gently used books. We give you a little token, and you can either trade for one of the books that someone else has brought in, or you can get a discount on the new books. And then we donate some of the extra books to Damiano Center, so that anybody who's in the shelter and just needs to get their mind off of where they're sitting and what's going on in their life can, focus on maybe reading something of either uplifting or at least a little exciting instead of thinking about all the stuff that they have going on in their life for a moment. And then we have second Saturdays. We have the LGBTQ coffee chat at Dovetail. And we did have to cancel this last one for an emergency, so to kind of double schedule, but that's something we do almost every second Saturday at 2. It's a really good group. We've had anywhere between 5 and I think the largest time was 20 people. So we had to kind of break that into like chunks of people to kind of be able to make sure they could hear each other. But we call it a book club, but it's kind of a non-book club because we may start there, but we talk about basically whatever's inspiring you, be it video games, be it movies, anything that some artists behind put their story into, right? And then we just kind of let it flow from there. So those are really fun events that we currently have. And that's kind of my current day job and night job and weekend job.
I was gonna say, I swear, when is your downtime, Lara?
Long time ago, I realized that I build my downtime into my projects, right? So, for example, like for me, the coffee chat is one I love running, right, or working on, because yes, it's a work event, but at the end of the day, it's just people getting together and enjoying their company. And so, for me, it's no different than if I invited you over to the house, right? And we just chilled and talked about stuff. And same with, the support groups for Trans Northland, right? Yeah, we get into some heavy topics sometimes, but a lot of times it's just people needing company, just needing community, just needing to know that, there's others like them, and there's things that people do. One of the things, that big shift for me coming from Kansas to Minnesota, was the difference in the way the community connects. Just because of the infrastructure in Kansas, a lot of the community connection for the LGBT spaces were kind of trauma hubs, if you will. We were having to build the survival networks, and that's all we had. Was the survival networks. It's gotten a lot better down there through years of working with groups and stuff like that. So, for example, I'm on the LGBTQ Foundation of Kansas as well. I'm their vice president and one of their board members. And we've helped develop that organization to be, kind of similar and kind of matching to kind of the concept with Trans Northland. So it's kind of interesting that they kind of organically developed in 2 different spaces at 2 different times. But up here, when we first arrived, the fact of a Trans Joy Fest, first of all, was crazy. It was like, that's amazing. Just the fact that you have that, and you were focusing on joy, right? And then as we kind of delved in, we realized that, it's not all about, a lot of people outside of the community think, oh, it's all about, who you're sleeping with, or, what's in your pants, that type of stuff. And up here, it was a really a different perspective, right? Because like one of the things that we found was, whoa, there's a gardening group, which is just a bunch of LGBT people who getting together and talking about gardening, or dog sledding, or Tai Chi. And it's like, you don't have to fully just be your gender or your sexual orientation, which is kind of what you get, no pun intended, pegged by in Kansas. But up here, you can be kind of a fully rounded individual, right? And you can have hobbies outside of just being and just existing. And that was liberating.
Certainly. I go and I talk to a lot of people and do these presentations and whatnot, and I always am saying, like, yes, I am trans, but like that's such a small part of all of who I am,
Oh
right?
yeah.
I mean, it's an important part for sure, and it's an identity that's super important to me. And yeah, I don't always want to go to like a LGBT thing. Like, I want to do Tai Chi. I want to show up and learn about botany, going on a walk in Hartley. I mean, it's like there's so many ways that we all bring different cool elements of who we are and our hobbies and what we're into. And I just love it because
Yeah,
those are the things we need to like survive every day these days.
yeah, I have to laugh. More of my personality is based around the Timberwolves basketball team than there it is about being intersex.
What? What? Okay, you have to tell me more about that. What do you mean by that?
Oh, I've been an avid basketball fan since I was a kid. My grandfather used to do the facilities management for KU in Kansas, and before Larry Bird left playing basketball to become a coach, he was already kind of starting to think about how that would look. And I was a little kid, and I literally ran into him at my grandfather's work, and met him, and just kind of like just a really cool dude. Got his signatures, things like that. And then my dad kind of explained who he was, and we started watching basketball, and I was hooked. And so at like 6, I started watching everything basketball, and that's been kind of just an integral part of who I am from playing. Until I realized I was way too short to play really good basketball, and said, I'm just going to be a spectator. And then, but I've loved the Timberwolves for forever. I like most '90s kid had my Bulls by my Bulls era, but then it was really funny because Sarah's family's like, why a Minnesota team? Because I had never been to Minnesota at that point until I met Sarah. I didn't even know anybody from Minnesota. I'm just like, honestly, I like the logo. And then there was some really good players I followed from college to the NBA, and just got to watching. So
Wow, I feel like we've unlocked a whole new level in our friendship, Lara. You're a basketball fan.
oh yeah, I'm
I love it.
long standing.
I love it. I love it. I was a big Kevin Garnett fan back in the day. We used
Oh,
to
there
watch
you go.
back then. So yeah, that's funny. I love it. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I can't forget to throw up, and we must mention who these lovely friends are.
Yes, those are our two lovely dogs who end up coming to some of our events. You will see them at Duluth Cider, and on the first Saturdays, and you will see Ollie over in Superior almost every day that we're open. And Ollie is the one that is the one closest to us. He's an apricot pug, 7 years old. And Sylvie is a Frenchie pug mix called a Frug, which I didn't know was a thing until we got her. And she is a bundle of chaos, and I love everything about her. Her name is actually Sylvie, and she is named after the female Loki from Marvel. You kind of figure out where you go from there. And then, Ollie is actually named after two people. He's named after Oliver Quinn from the Green Arrow comics, and his middle name is Wendell. So he's actually named after Oliver Wendell Holmes, the Supreme Court Justice.
What? I love it so much. The shop pups, they are so fun. And as someone who has gotten to go and let them out, I feel excited because they are fun. And also, I can't not mention the first time y'all asked me to come and let your dogs out and like feed them and stuff, and then you had forgotten somehow to mention you have how many 7 kitties who just
Yeah.
kept coming around the corners, and I was like, oh, another cat. I love cats.
Yeah.
So that was like the
7
best
cats.
of my life. Yeah, and y'all have adopted and like rescued most of those, right?
Yeah, actually, all of them. Ollie is the only one we've actually paid for. And all of the others were rescues. We used to work with some organizations in Kansas that were designed at helping rescue street cats, getting them fixed and all of that, and giving them better lives and all of that. And so that's kind of been how our approach to animals, and then also that's also how we got our three children as well. They were they all LGBT. Their families kind of pushed them out, and as they got older and were living on the streets, they kind of came into the fold, and we eventually adopted one of them formally, and then the other two they joke are the tag-alongs because they were friends of our son, and so now, even though the math doesn't work out, we're the proud parents of a 22-year-old, a 24-year-old, and a 26-year-old.
Well, there you go. And yeah, how many times does the math not math, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it would be too boring if the math was always mathing. Well, yeah, thank you so much for sharing about, yourself and the work that you do. And I mean, you really do, you're out there in the community. People, whenever I mention Lara from Crow and Co, they're like, oh yeah, Crow and Co. So I think, whatever it is y'all are doing, you're creating a really, really beautiful, I think, connective space and yeah, like a hobby for folks to grab a new book. And you have so many that have like queer and trans characters and storylines, and it's not all about being queer or trans. It's like that's just a part of those characters storylines. And so yeah, I highly recommend, if you're watching, to go check out a pop-up, go check out the new storefront in Superior. And yeah, so now I'm going to shift us a little bit here, Lara, because we were talking about all this cool, exciting, happy, fun stuff. And I think you have a really unique perspective, with all of your years doing lawyer work and just, you have such a good head on you, and I know that you've been kind of keeping an eye out on the landscape of things as executive orders and laws are getting passed or attempted to be passed, that are harmful to trans folks and, queer folks at large as well. And so, our next question is, in these tense times, like, what advice or ideas could you share with folks who are watching or listening?
Yeah, definitely. We all kind of know what's happening in the world, so I won't get too much into that. But some of the things that you can do kind of practically. One of the first things I say is, if you make sure your documentation is in order. Make sure if you your license or have the accurate information on it. Make sure that if you can, get a passport. Also, Minnesota has what's called like an enhanced ID, which is really cool because it's sort of like a passport for a few countries, but it's also a real ID that is through the state of Minnesota. I've got to give a shout out to a friend who taught me, who actually introduced me to it. So I really appreciate that if you're watching. But it's cool because it also allows you to have land and sea or boat access to Mexico, Canada, and a couple of other places. So it works as like the real ID with the star. But it also allows, if you're just trying to get to Canada real easily, you don't have to go through the whole process of bringing a passport and showing it all that. It doesn't change anything at the airport. You would still have to show a passport if you were flying to Europe, for example, or even from flying to Canada from the airport. But if you're driving or you're kayaking across the boundary waters, there you go. And so stuff like that. If you're married in an LGBT marriage, we never know what's going to happen, right? We've seen precedent, that we never expected to be overturned. And this current Supreme Court seems pretty okay with just kind of overturning certain things if they don't feel like it was decided correctly back then. And so for that, I say, hey, make sure your estate plan is in order. If you're in a same-sex marriage, go that extra step. Make sure you have your will. Make sure you have your trust. Most importantly, make sure you have your durable powers of attorneys for health and finance in case something happens to you. Right. Last thing you want to have happen is that your spouse not be able to come into the hospital or not be able to make a decision for you because of something the Supreme Court has done. Luckily, we're a little bit insulated because Minnesota, our Supreme Court, things like that, our laws will still protect you. But it's always a belt and suspenders piece, and you never know where you're going to be next. Like, like I said, I wouldn't have expected to be in Minnesota 3 years ago, and until I had to make a shift. Other than that, those are the main things. And I do that type of stuff through my law firm. I help kind of draft those types of documents. Make sure that, if you're planning on getting a name change, think about it. Right now, there's a little bit of a dichotomy. I have to joke that I still am fighting some of those because I can get my paperwork right in Oklahoma and in Minnesota. But right now, that there may be some possibility that my federal documentation would then change if I had to go do that, because of the executive order and just the fact that the original doctor put M on my birth certificate before realizing it should have been an F, and things like that. And so I can't seem to get those 3 locations to line up all at once so I can get everything aligned. But just kind of make sure that you have access to those and you kind of do those. There's a lot of good organizations around doing pro bono or low cost work. We also, my firm, Crow Law, has a kind of a shifting scale for depending upon what people can pay and what the services are, right? Like I said, there's certain services I cannot do. I don't do court work, but I do help people in the background, right? So, draft all of their paperwork for a name change, tell them how the process should go and what they need to do and what they can expect and things like that. And so, yeah, definitely get those types of things in order. Make sure you have just kind of standard stuff, like what's a backup plan? Who in your family, if something were to happen to you and you have children, who do you want to make sure those kids go to, and all of that type of stuff. And right nowadays, things like Life 360 to keep track of loved ones is really critical, no matter who you are. We've seen people that, everybody's like, oh, why were they detained by ICE, for example? And you'd be like, I don't know. But they were. And so, it's good to kind of keep track on those that you love and those that love you. And so those would be some of the advice. And then other than that, I would just say really try to focus on the positives where you can. Be practical, be protective. It's sort of like that trust but verify stuff, right? That was, a common phrase. Plan for the hope for the best, plan for the worst. That's kind of how I've lived my life. And then, if everything goes great, then you don't need it. But if it goes sideways, then you have it. So I definitely say get all your stuff in order. Make sure you're making those connections. You have your backup plans. You have your escape plans, if you will, at least thought about, and kind of go from there. I mean, because that escape plan may not be, oh, I'm fleeing to Europe, right, or fleeing to Canada. It could be like, hey, I'm in a really kind of rural part, and I just need to get to Duluth. What resources do I have? And organizations like Trans Northland are good organizations that have, hey, these are the resources you would need if you came in this area. Mutual aid programs, things like that. So just kind of keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, keep your possibilities open, and make those connections on the ground.
Yeah. Oof, that's a lot of good advice. And yeah, I mean, a lot of what you shared there too. I mean, many of my mentors have talked about preparing, some of that safety planning as if you're preparing for some type of natural disaster. What would you need if you were stuck, I guess, here in a blizzard? If you were stuck out in your car, like you need some backup jackets and mittens and a shovel. And, so thinking through those things of if I had to get up and leave, some folks have go bags that are packed and just that they keep in their trunk of their car just in case. And like you said, whatever that sort of worst case scenario that folks are worried or fearful of, you can make a plan now, so that you can feel more prepared. Not that, God forbid something awful like that happens. We know that's going to be incredibly difficult. And also it will help if we can prepare these things on the earlier rather
Mhm.
than later, I guess, if that makes sense.
Well, and psychologically, there's been studies show, if you're preparing for something, then you're feeling like you're doing something, and it kind of helps you get out of that cycle of there's nothing I can do, there's nothing there, I'm stuck, it's all happening to me instead of or happening around me instead of me being part of it. And that's one way that some of my mentors have taught me to be able to be like kind of take a hold of it, get your bug out bag prepared, and that get your lockdown plan prepared. If you had to if you were stuck in a blizzard in the house, right? What would you need? And it's all kind of the same stuff, right? It's just what's those contingencies you're preparing for.
Yep, exactly. And that reminds me too. I mean, I've had people reach out to me directly in the last couple of days who are like, hey, if there are Black and brown folks in the community who don't feel safe leaving their home to go get groceries or, whatever it is right now while we have this ICE presence in our community, there are folks who are stepping up and being like, I will come bring you your groceries, and so I think that's always one of the really beautiful things that if I can notice those, it's like the Mr. Rogers quote, right? Look for the helpers in times
Yep.
of craziness. And there are lots of helpers out there right now. And a lot of people are organizing and getting active and are wanting to help out community members. And that includes Lara, so if you are an LGBT person who's worried about parental rights or getting that name change or documents changed and you need some help, or that process feels really overwhelming, reach out to us here at Trans Northland. We will connect you with resources. We can connect you directly with folks like Lara who could sit down and be like, here's what it is, let me help you fill this out, and at low cost, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's always a concern. I know I had
Yep.
to go through a really expensive court thing for the adoption of my child, and not everybody can afford that. And I think a lot of folks assume there's no way I could afford that, but there are, like you said, resources, organizations out there that will provide that like low cost
Mm-hmm.
sliding scale kind of fees, right?
Yeah, but I always joke that even if I don't know the answer, I usually know who to bug to get you guys an answer or get you hooked up with the right people. So, I mean, I'm not above sending people to other people that I know that are doing good work. Just had to do that with a cross borders issue with somebody in Wisconsin. Had it was a Wisconsin Minnesota thing, and the expert was over in Wisconsin. And I'm like, hey, I got you hooked up with them. Here they are. And so, yeah, I may not know, but I'm persistent.
That's right. We will find the answers. All right, Lara. Well, as we're wrapping up, we always like to ask all of our guest stars to just share, one or two things. How are you taking care of yourself during this time?
One thing I do and I try to do is I kind of, as we've kind of talked about throughout, is I try to continue to build community. Um, when you're on Facebook or you're on TikTok or you're on Instagram, the bad thing is that there's so many bots out there that make it sound worse than it is. Um, you know, there was a study showing that a lot of the MAGA voices that people were hearing were actually just bots that were designed by Russia and other areas of the world just to amplify the chaos. But when you get on the ground and you start talking to people, it's usually, yes, there are some people that are extreme either way, or have some of those extreme beliefs, but there's a lot more commonality than we may think. And getting on in and talking to real people like Sean and Issa, who's been on the program before, and others that are doing the work or in the community, or just hanging out with other people within Duluth and Superior and the surrounding Northland. Those connections that really show you that there is good still in the world, and there are helpers, and there's positive out there. You just have to look for it. And now I say that as somebody who's kind of an extreme pessimist. I still try to do that all the time. And then more practically for myself, I am a fitness person. So anytime I can get to running on the treadmill or working out, or Trans Northland had a curling event, anything to kind of get my brain and my body working together. That's kind of how I try to take care of myself.
That is rad. Thanks for sharing that, Lara. And hopefully, you know, the everything you hear on here in terms of self-care and community care just gives y'all ideas that you may not have thought of, you know, something that may click for you and may be that thing that can get you through the hard days and sustain you. So thanks for
Definitely.
sharing that. And yeah, I can't believe it. We're already almost out of here. Lara, I know you've got another thing to run to right at 1. And so I just want to say thank you again for joining us and taking the time and helping me out with my last minute procrastination after the holidays. So we're really grateful to have you and Sarah and the whole animal family here in the Northland with us.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes, and so I will pop you off of here, Lara, if you need to run. And then I can wrap us up here with a couple of just last minute reminders. So there are the handles and the website for Crow and Co. to go. Find them, follow them. They are so good at social media. You will know what they're up to, when and where, if you're following them. And then I want to leave that up for a second. We are pumped because I did not procrastinate this time. And we've got a couple of guest stars lined up already for our next conversations. And so 2 weeks from today, I'm very excited to welcome in a friend of mine and just really, really rad human, Courtney Cochran, who uses they, them pronouns. Courtney has a ton of years of experience as a clinical herbalist and way more years as a social worker and community organizer here in the Northland. If you've been at rallies and protests, if you were involved at all with when we worked as a community to get conversion therapy banned here in Duluth, Courtney was one of the folks behind the scenes that really helped that get past that ban on conversion therapy. And so really excited for Courtney to come. They run Allseth Acres Apothecary and Herb Farm with their partner, and they are very excited to share more about their newest adventure in community caretaking, which is offering massage and bodywork care. And I have experienced Courtney's work, and it was really, really good. So you're going to want to learn more about what they're up to and how to get on their list to get some massage and body work done. And just as a reminder, if you're looking for things to do, you can pop onto our website, check out our events calendar. We've got not only our Trans Northland events and support groups on there, but we try to put all the LGBT plus events on there, or if they are allied events. And we know these businesses to be inclusive and great folks. So take a look there. There's a ton of stuff that's always happening here in the Northland and beyond. And yeah, thank you so much again for tuning in with us here live with Trans Northland. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we've got a YouTube and podcast version of this. So follow us everywhere. And as always, we hope you take really, really good care until the next time we join you live with Trans Northland. See you later, friends.